All right, friends, welcome into our ACUHO-I Housing Internship Program session for today. My name is Spencer Giese. I work at the ACUHO-I Home Office, and part of my role is to help oversee this internship program. But I am joined by a number of members of our Housing Internship Program Committee. They'll be sharing a lot of great resources and approaches for the interview process. So I'm going to pass over to Brent, and I'll be here in the background if you have any questions throughout. Thanks again for joining us.
Yes, everyone, thank you for joining us. So we'll go ahead and start out with introductions. So my name is Brent Schaefer. I'm the Assistant Complex Director here at the University of Kansas. I'm very excited to be with you all today. Can we go to the next slide, please? Perfect.
Also find the mute button in a few different windows. Hi, everyone. My name is Abigail Leppert. I am a graduate community director at Clemson University, where I'm also attending for my master's degree.
Hello, everybody. My name is Darius Porter. I'm currently the Director of Auxiliary Services and Conferences here at Gannett University in Erie, Pennsylvania.
So kind of before we get started today, we would just like to administer a poll just to kind of see who is in our audience today. We have two questions and it should pop up at any point. How many have hosted before and how many are new to the process? And then our second question we have is who here has actually conducted ACUHO-I interviews in the past? So we'll give you just a few seconds to answer that. Perfect. So kind of who has participated thus far? It looks like 56% have hosted before, and then we have about 7 of the 16 who participated in the poll. This is the first time hosting, so we're really excited to be giving you some information throughout. And then we'll have plenty of time. We have some panelists towards the end for questions and answers, and we hope to really give you all the information that you need today. Next slide, please.
We have our second question. So specifically, if you have hosted, have you conducted the specific interviews for your ACUHO-I internship before? If you've conducted interviews in the past, in a general sense, love that. But we are looking for specifically having interviewed for ACUHO-I candidates before. So take a few moments and answer that. Okay, so it looks like we are also seeing a somewhat even split, a little bit more. A few folks are a little bit more experienced with ACUHO-I internships, but we're at least interviewing for our ACUHO-I candidates that are in the system. And for those that have not yet, don't worry, we're hoping that this helps returning interview host sites as well as new folks. So kind of launching into that is that the goals in the format for today is, as we mentioned, we will have a panelist. We're going to go over some general reminders, tips, advice, but then actually have an open format for you all to ask questions. The goal of this entire kind of webinar and session is just so that way it's a safe space for you to learn from other host sites, to ask questions, to learn more about the processes, especially as we are gearing up for February 8th, which is coming up in less than 1 week. Questions before we continue? All right, excellent.
All right, perfect. So we just want to provide, the Housing Internship Program timeline. Obviously, hopefully everybody knows that the program opened November 30th. We're currently in the position between January 4th and February 8th to research and review. So candidates can look at our profiles and see what internships are available. Hosts and/or candidates cannot communicate at this time. There should not be any messaging going back and forth between host and candidate. And then postings are still able to be edited or added at this time. We have received questions in regards to hosts asking, is it too late to post new internships? And the answer is it's not too late at all. You can still go in and add that component. And then February 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that communication opens. Applications can become visible. And this is also important that you can recruit candidates. I mean, we put it on here as a committee to go to that candidate button, click browse candidates, and you should be able to search and filter based off of graduate or undergraduate, depending on what you're specifically looking for your interns. And then lastly, you can schedule interviews, but we cannot conduct them until February 15th, and that's when the interviews can begin. Are there any questions in regards to that timeline that's presented?
Excellent. And then the big emphasis is that job offers cannot be made until March 8th. So no job offers, even if you are extremely efficient and you conduct your interviews, you find your golden candidate. That is excellent if you achieve that in the next 2 weeks, but please do not send out a job offer until March 8th. Also, after, something to note is that after all this process begins, is that you can still continue having candidates apply if that is something that you've opened your deadlines for, and that if your first round search is not successful, you can continue that process.
All right, so now we're going to move into biases and illegal questions. So I think it's important just to recognize that we all have implicit biases. So we kind of just wanted to in discussions, wanted to bring you aware of some of the different biases that occur when interviewing. So the contrast bias is a huge one. So this occurs when an interviewer inappropriately compares candidates to a single candidate, or one that really maybe you thought was superior in nature or anything like that. So being aware of that contrast bias is really important. The second one being the first impression bias. So this occurs when candidates are judged based on what happened during the first few minutes of an interview. So trying to give grace in that capacity, and understanding that many of the candidates might be pretty nervous. So giving that 1 to 2 minutes of grace period is preferred. Similar to me bias, so this occurs when the candidate has interests or other characteristics that are the same as those of the interviewer, which causes the interviewer to overlook negative aspects of the candidate. So that's a fairly common one as well. The halo effect bias occurs when the interviewer evaluates a candidate positively based on one singular characteristic. Harshness bias occurs when the interviewer evaluates a candidate negatively based on one singular characteristic. And then lastly, one that we found was fairly important and frequent was that confirmation bias. So this is a tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions of a candidate. Then we also wanted to draw attention to avoiding illegal questioning when interviewing. So we really encourage you all to review your institution's HR policies and ask any questions that you may have regarding the interview process and specific questions towards your HR department. So obviously questions regarding age, disability status, religion, and or marital and family status should be avoided in interviews if at all possible. And then in the US, it is illegal to discriminate due to race, color, religion, sex, gender, age, national origin, or ability.
Perfect. And so we would like to discuss some tasks to complete now. In the meantime, prior to you scheduling your interviews. The first thing is to develop a fair evaluation system. We, encourage you guys to think about a committee, maybe some student staff who have already experienced a similar position to be able to provide insight outside of your own in regards to evaluating interns that apply. We put a picture on some of the evaluation topics, so peer expectations and supervisor expectations, administrative skills, and then also institutional fit or motivation. There may be some candidates that are stellar, but may not fit what you guys are looking for. And there's some people that could use a little additional work, but fits the mode of what your institution stands for. So that'll be one pivotal thing to actually decide while you're evaluating your candidates. And then some checklists to consider. So speak with human resources, as Brent said before, but not only as an interview questions, but also what the timeline is going to look like. So we know when offers can go out, but from that point on offers going out, your HR team will need additional paperwork, especially if you may consider having your intern work with minors. There may be clearances and things that they may need prior to your intern arriving. So number one is speak to your HR in regards to that timeline. Two is to determine your interviewers. Who else is going to be able to help you out to be able to facilitate this experience for your intern, as well as to be able to put your institution's best foot forward. Because it's not only about fit for you, but it's going to be about fit for them as well. So selecting interviewers who can adequately speak to your institution's mission and experiences will be really pivotal in regards to this internship. Three is to plan the interview timeline. So plan it out. How much time is it going to take? You may think about doing or conducting second round interviews. As a previous host, it definitely gets pretty close on who you would like to select. So selecting that second round interview time slot to be able to ask some questions to further evaluate their personality and skill sets could be pivotal in this process. And then four, developing evaluation forms or criteria, basically a rubric on what you're looking for. We know that, as we talked about, we have a few biases, and everybody's five may not be the same, but to be able to priority rank, what is important in regards to decision is going to be very pivotal. Another thing that I found to be helpful is to create a position folder. So create a position folder so that when you are able to see your applicants, you can take all their resources and contents and put it in one place so that after the interview, you can go back and relook at the cover letter again, or maybe look at their resume again and not have to navigate so much through it to be able to find those contents. So having a position folder is going to be pivotal. And then an established shared drive. So at our institution, we use Google a lot. So we have a shared drive to put, your applicant's name, and then maybe have some comments written out on their skill sets or their strengths or why they have the ability to be, awarded this position, so that everybody can see it. That's a part of your committee or interview team, so that you guys can make suggestions throughout the process to know, who's your top candidate. Are there any questions about the evaluation system or just some tips and tricks in regards to this process?
Okay, thank you. And please feel free to continue utilizing the chat. Thank you, Kate, for asking a question earlier. Thank you, Lauren, for answering that. So another aspect to consider is that ACUHO-I internships and these candidates are falling into like a certain kind of middle ground that might be a little different than how we normally conduct interviews. So just consider the level of applicants and who is applying and the general demographics. Our typical applicants fall into graduate students pursuing typically a master's, but sometimes a doctoral program, juniors and seniors and undergraduate, or anyone that might be in transition, recently postgraduate, considering a new career. So that doesn't necessarily dictate any age range, but consider that they are a little bit different than just high school or first year college undergraduate students. But consider this as you're thinking of questions, and maybe even consider having some different levels of ways to modify those questions in terms of difficulty. Again, consider that these candidates will have higher skills than the typical new RA, that if you are in residence life and interviewing or having placements, they will know more and have a higher level of skills than them, but that they still are often going to be underneath the level of a full-time director. So make sure that you are not going about these interviews in the same format or with the same expectations of someone being an expert in the field, or the way that you might go about if you are looking for a community director or a resident director. So again, about modification, but the main thing that we want to emphasize is that this should be a great opportunity for both the host site, yourselves, to make a great first impression on these candidates. Use this as almost a very long-term recruiting strategy. If you are looking for any full-time staff afterwards, we all know how word of mouth gets around. But that this also can serve as a very valuable learning opportunity for candidates. So you don't have to come in perfect, but think about maybe setting some learning objectives, a little bit of a loose curriculum of what you want them to be able to achieve and learn by the end of the internship. Questions on this? So with the internship housing portal, we are having this again because This is going to be your bread and butter for all of those internal processes that you are going to be doing with your human resources department, your other partners, anyone else in your department. At the end of the day, we just really want to emphasize that it's important that all postings are going on for ACUHO-I internships on the ACUHO-I portal. This is where your interviews will need to be offered and communication will primarily open up. And then particularly when you are creating and sending out offers on March 8th or afterwards, it will need to go through the ACUHO-I portal. So you'll see with our next slide is that all offers must be made through the ACUHO-I portal to be, quote, real. So that way they are taken off the list. It is developed in our system, and that it also makes sure that the candidate is kind of taken off the market should they accept. So yes, at the end of the day, just make sure anything that you do on your email or on your shared drive is also reflected in the ACUHO-I portal as you're going through the interview process. Okay, so we are going to open this up to our panelists.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and introduce our two panelists today. So the first being Lauren Murphy, who is an assistant director in campus living and residential education at the George Washington University. And our second one is A. Darius Porter, who is a director of auxiliary services and conferencing and has been helping us out with the slides thus far at Gannon University. So overall, I'm just going to start out with what advice do you have on the process, and just tell us a little bit about how the internship has worked at your institution. Lauren, would you like to start us out?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brent. Overall advice on the process, I think Abigail and Adarius has also kind of indicated this in their sections of the presentation, but I think it's really easy that we hit this time of year. I know like I have professional staff searches going, I have student staff search processes going. It's a busy time of year. And remembering that you need just as much intentionality into this process to yield good results. This process can move really quickly. I really love the fact that I have established deadlines and dates from the process, but really being mindful to do that pre-work of, I work with a committee. We have 3 roles. So I have 2 other hiring managers that I work with for our positions, as well as we have some of our frontline staff sit on the committee as well. Taking time to talk about philosophy, approach, goals for the position, talking about and doing some initial training on biases and interview etiquette and just kind of skill building for that. And then being really kind of thoughtful towards like integrating that into my interview and review process at every kind of phase of the position. Brent, I know you asked about like how we kind of structure our internship. I leave my position description intentionally slightly vague, focusing more on the competencies and the core competencies that the role would offer. And I kind of structure my questions around like kind of seeing their interest in residential education, which is the primary one I look after, what kind of goals and things they're looking for. I don't fully craft my internship until I hire my intern. We create almost a syllabus of sorts together, a shared document with learning outcomes and kind of structuring. But because of that, I'm also looking for an applicant that can kind of come into this environment where there's a little less structure in my internship as well. So I ask a lot of questions on what their grad experience has been with ambiguity, what their communication has been like with campus partners, versus like really kind of specific skill sets and things like that. And I've found that to be very kind of useful through my process.
Perfect. And so I was going to say that I'm at our institution, we're the opposite of Lauren. So for our job description, it's extremely straightforward, and it's only because we're a smaller institution. We only have about 1,300 residential students here. And so camps and conferencing is kind of a huge auxiliary generator here at the university, but we work really closely. There's a lot of overlap with the office of residence life. So going throughout the process, I definitely had to do a lot of cross-departmental collaboration on summer needs around campus. So our office of residence life utilizes this intern for summer housing as well. So we had to clearly define it out and state that, hey, you're going to be working with summer housing students as well as, you know, doing things for camps and conferences because we utilize the same inventory. So my advice on it as well, just like Lauren, is kind of building that team so that you guys can establish your needs when you're going through this, so that there's a lot of clarity going in. And then a lot of member checking with the intern as you're going through the process to be able to say, is this meeting your expectations? Is this, what you were looking for, so that you guys are on the same page. But everything else that Lauren stated about, this time of year, and there's a lot of processes going on. So you don't want to just kind of cram everything in all at one time and just go through it and then say like, all right, I only did one interview. I think that this is the person, because you may find a diamond in the rough. So being patient and diligent going through the process is going to be extremely important as a host.
Thank you both for those perspectives. I really appreciate it. So my second question that I ask is going to be a two-parter. So how do you conduct your outreach through this process, and how do you keep candidates looped into your process? So we'll start again with Lauren.
Yeah, it depends on the year on what my outreach looks like. It depends on, on that day that contact period opens, what my pool looks like. There's years that I've had 100 applicants in my pool, which is more than I can kind of move through a 3-week interview process. There's times I've only had 20, and I do a little bit more kind of search on the back end for candidates. If I'm searching for candidates and doing outreach in my own recruitment efforts, I really focus on the candidates are able to elect the competency areas that they're most excited in. And when I outreach them, something I ask my candidates to do who choose to apply to my role is that I ask them to submit a cover letter specific to my role. They might apply to all 3 of my internships, but I need it specific to the role, because the hard thing with the applicant pools that we have is a lot of them have similar experiences. A lot of them are RAs or former hall directors or working in just kind of adjacent offices on our campuses. And I want to know like what really sparks their joy and their energy towards the functional areas that I'm needing for what I'm searching for. So when I do that outreach, I ask them just to kind of keep the playing ground level with all the other applicants. I've seen this, I saw your cover letter, or I saw your profile, I saw your resume. If you'd be interested in applying, I really encourage you to submit a cover letter for this, tailored to, I always put the same language in over and over again because I know they're getting bombarded. To hopefully encourage them to apply. And then for the candidates that have already applied, and sometimes I don't choose to do that outreach because it's such a large pool. I like Brent's question about keeping them looped into my process. All of my candidates, I do a poll when we start the contact period, but of course candidates can keep applying. So I'm having my staff keep an eye on new applications coming in. I'll get an initial email just to acknowledge that we've received their materials, thanking them for their interest, letting them know that we're reviewing and we'll be in contact, because obviously I cannot interview 100 applicants. We generally cut our pool down to about like 15 students for one role. And I let folks know that. And then for the candidates that I know that we're not going to be able to interview them in the time that we have, I let them know that we're moving on to other candidates. And then for everybody else, I let them know what my process looks like. I send a very detailed email, not only outlining what my process looks like, but I also, because this is an education moment, I send them like pertinent articles about my university that's like impacting us currently. Whether it's my student newspaper, sometimes I share social media, university communications, other publications, because I know that they might not be doing the research or know how to do the research to know everything that I would need them to know eventually. So I also try to guide that process for them of, you're interviewing us, so I need you to know certain things about our culture and our campus and my department. And if I want you to know those things, I have to put it in front of them. So keeping my candidate looped in. And then I keep in contact with folks throughout. I also, and I was like, not everyone does this, but I cut my pool the week before, and I kind of cut my pool down. I don't select a person at that point, but I let my folks know of, I'm going to cut my pool down to my top candidates. It's not that you couldn't hear from me, but my top 4 to 5, probably after I get all those phone calls, if I get to there, like you know, the chances are slim because I believe in being transparent. That also allows my folks that I put in that top pool that they know at every point, if I put out an offer, I'm going to let all the rest of you know that there's an offer out. And then I'm going to let you know when the position is filled as well, because you deserve that. You've come through this process with me and we've built a relationship. So just keeping kind of in contact at every point, especially as you kind of move your pool down to who you're selecting.
Perfect. I agree wholeheartedly with all of the things that Lauren stated. The only additional comment that I would like to add in regards to conducting my outreach is that understand your institution, and maybe when somebody's researching your position, they may not know that it's a fit for them. So really specifically going into their resume and outlining those components and saying like, hey, you know, you haven't applied for this position at this point, but this is why I see you as a good fit, and outline some of those transferable skills to kind of encourage them to actually apply will be really good. I believe as a host last year, that helped me a lot to increase the amount of applicants for the position, just because they didn't know that it was the experience that they were actually looking for.
Thank you both for your takes on that. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to ask another two-parter. So how do you go about the organization of the interviews? You all have spoke a little bit on this. And then how do you go about the elimination? I'm going to start with AD first, and then we'll go to Lauren.
And so for the organization of the interviews, if you guys don't know, there is kind of a big calendar inside your ACUHO-I application or your portal. And so definitely sending out, you know, a few times to your top candidates so that you don't have too much of overlap. And then once that time gets accepted by your candidate, it then blocks it off on your calendar. And so then you're able to see what you have left and what you have available, because that's going to be really big. You never want to get into incident to where you offer too many times all at one time to too many people, and then have to then circle back and say, actually, that time isn't available because I picked somebody else. And so just making sure that you outline who you want to interview, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, send them the variety of times and say, let me know all the times that work. Don't just say one time, just give me all the times that work for you. And then you will communicate back through that portal. And then it'll say, hey, this interview is at this time. And then it'll let you know and get you alerts. In regards to elimination, I use a evaluation point system with my committee to be able to keep people at the top. And we have a discussion after the first rounds. And I have my student staff who will get supervised by this position advocate kind of for their person. And so we have a team of about 6 to 8 people, and they hear the things that resonate with each student is always different. Some people want people that are more personable. Some people want the structure. And so because we have, you know, 2 people, then we mix and match based off of group dynamic. So if we have this strong personality who can come in and supplement to be able to help them on their areas that they can show improvement in. So then after that first round to say like, okay, it's pretty close. Let's do second round interviews for these people. So we then interview those, we send out the messaging via the portal and say, hey, we would like to do second round interviews. And then also after the first round, we also have that caveat as well to say that we will be conducting second round interviews so that it's not a surprise. And so they're like, dang, I thought after one interview, I would have been appointed this position, but saying like, hey, we may be conducting second round interviews. This is what that timeline will look like so that they can have additional things to prepare for.
For myself in the organization of my interview process, as said, I have 3 positions. So it's me and 2 other leads for those positions. And then we have frontline staff members on our committee. During the interview phase, we break up into 3 different groups that we really look after each individual role specifically, but we still meet and connect with each other because it is not unusual for an applicant to apply for all 3. Or sometimes I know I'll see an applicant and I'm like, you know what? Their skill set and their passion area really aligns more with operations. You might want to interview this person after I interviewed them as well. So we keep in contact with each other, and then we also keep in contact with the candidates we're interested with moving forward, because it would be kind of a waste of our time to have competing offers from the same institution, just from two different roles. So we keep connected with that very firmly. But then with the interviews itself, myself and my staff member that I work with directly for my role, we block off time on our calendars to offer candidates like Adarius was talking about. I also believe it's really important for us to be conscious that our applicants are nationwide, sometimes they're abroad as well. So offering a variety of times. I've already told my staff member that I was like, we will do evenings, because even if they're in our time zone, they might be in class, they might be working. We need to set them up to do their best interview. And I really work with them as well. Like, I let the candidates know in all language that if they need to request something outside of the times that I'm offering, we will work with them as well. But I know I've watched candidates get very anxious about asking for those things, because you know that there's that power dynamic. They don't feel like they can ask for the things that they need. So I try to readily set it up for them as well. And I find that that really helps. Like, I actually do better in interviews in the evenings, because it lets me do my work during the day and then kind of go to the evening. But everybody has their process, because you might have a candidate that's 4 hours behind you, and having them interview at 6 in the morning is just not setting them up for success. How we go about elimination. So in determining interviews, it's always interesting every year to see, no matter how much I put in my position descriptions asking for cover letters and how much I put it in my emails. And honestly, I also follow up with applicants if they have not submitted it, because I believe it's educational, and I'm trying to keep everything level. I actually usually have about half my pool not submit cover letters. So that kind of creates an elimination kind of point, that we just don't have the point of information that we need compared to other applicants. So if they're not able to submit one, or if they don't respond to me. And then very similar to AD, we have a rubric that we do, and it's me and the staff member on my role. We talk at every point about the applicants. And these folks are very talented. We not only talk about, the skills that they're giving, but like, what would they provide to our team, and what could we give them is a conversation we have of, okay, this person really has a deep knowledge of living, learning, community structure. We're going to be doing those projects this summer. So that's something they can give. Oh, we know that they're passionate in change processes. We know that these processes are going to have an overhaul. We try to really find a mutual kind of relationship between ourselves and our applicants based on their interests and our needs. And then when we get to the end of the process, when we get to elimination and kind of making that like our top 5 is usually what we do. It's 3 to 5, depending on the size of my pool. It's really comes down to that of, what do we need for the summer? And I can't always tell in February everything I'll need in June, but like, what am I perceiving in the meetings that I have, in the conversations I'm having with colleagues? And then it's the discussion between like the notes and the rubric system, but also kind of considering that with the person that I'm working with. And then we make the decision. And then it's also from there of, sometimes candidates don't choose us too. So then it's making your second choice sometimes and your third choice as well. And being really thoughtful about that at every point, even if you're going to your second person, of which one again meets your needs for the position that you're able to offer and the experience you're offering as well.
Well, thank you both for answering all of those questions that we have. So now I would like to open it up for any questions from the audience. We know we've gotten a lot in the chat, and I appreciate those. But feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question, or place something in the chat. Someone asked, Lauren, how do you avoid miscommunication when sharing the offer that offers are out with all candidates? I have done this in the past and had my second, third candidate accept other offers because they thought they were completely out of the running.
No, that's a great question. So I let mine know, and I let them know before when they're top, like when I cut my pool, I actually do phone calls for those 5. And I let them know, because I'm a more verbal person, I struggle to find ways to write these out, things clearly, that I let them know this is what this day will look like. I will put an offer out. If you are that person, you will have an offer. If you are one of the other folks, you'll get an email to let you know that an offer is out. But I will be sending a secondary email to let you know when an offer is accepted. Sometimes I still have my candidates accept other positions, but that's also why I do this. I want them to be empowered to drive their experience and their day, because I've watched too many grad students get stressed out about who's calling and weighing all those decisions. But I've also have candidates wait for me. I've had candidates be like, I knew that you had an offer out, but that in 24 hours you could have potentially been calling me, so I chose to wait for 24 hours. I think it's a balance. It doesn't always work out. But I think the more you communicate, I think the candidates very much respect that, because, you know, it's letting them drive their process.
Perfect. And AD or Lauren, a question that we just received in the chat is, do you normally call folks for their offer, or only send it through the ACUHO-I portal?
I send my offer through the ACUHO-I portal, and then once it's accepted through the portal, then I'll make a call to let them know that, you know, we're excited, you know, thank you so much, and then follow up with them about any questions that they may have, because then it's going to move into, you know, transition timeline. What does all this stuff look like? And then setting up those next steps, because again, as we spoke about earlier, in this webinar, about getting all the information from HR so that you're transparent with your intern. And then for anybody else who was really good, that was a top candidate that just wasn't selected, I'll follow up through the messaging system as well too, with feedback and letting them know, you know, they were a top candidate, we're excited, but we chose to just go in a different direction.
I call mine because usually I'm so excited, to be honest. So I call mine, but I also find it an opportunity that they get to ask some more clarifying questions, sometimes personal questions. I've had a lot of interns come to DC who have never been in the city, never lived in the city. So also are thinking about travel logistics and cost of living and all of those things. And they often ask those things during the interview, but sometimes they just have more very specific questions at that point. So as well as sending it in the portal, I believe in calling them, because I just think that it allows that door to be open, just to have more conversation about it.
I am not a panelist, but I just want to throw in that if you are a host site with multiple positions open and you are trying to fill multiple, sometimes a delayed delivery for an email can have all, 5 of those offers go out at once, because you can only call one person at a time, or only do one portal offer necessarily, like kind of bit by bit. So you can do a mix and match of it. I've seen it a lot of different ways as a candidate.
All right, perfect. Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to put something in the chat or unmute yourself.
I was wondering if in general, and thank you for this presentation, folks, if the positions that are available currently, if the majority are remote or in person. I am just concerned that our in-person isn't going to get the draw it needs, because maybe folks want a remote option instead. So I was just curious if ACUHO-I as a whole knows that.
No, that's a great question. The mass majority of our positions, over 92%, are in person. So hopefully that helps.
That makes me feel a lot better.
Great.
Thanks.
Someone asked, how can we spread the word about ACUHO-I internships? The candidate pool appears to be much smaller than usual this year. Makes me worried.
I know as a committee, we've been reaching out not only to past hosts and candidates, but also we're reaching out to grad programs. I agree with you. My numbers for views right now are lower, although Spencer continues to remind me, and I appreciate Spencer always reminding me this, that this group sometimes likes to apply last minute, like right before contact period starts. So I'm trying to stay calm about that as well. I think any of your networks and things like that, that you can push, like let folks know. I know I've even been emailing, like I have former RAs that are at grad programs right now, and I'm shocked sometimes that they don't know that this is a thing. I just always assume that folks do. So just continuing to kind of spread the word kind of through your networks as you would for many other positions.
Yeah, and I like to say, Lauren, I like to say they're deadline oriented, and the deadline's not here yet. But you know, this is a word of mouth opportunity where, and I can tell you on the ACUHO-I end, we don't have a direct line to students that would be potential interns in our program. This really comes from the field, talking to the field. So, I mean, as Brandy reaches out to this group, I'd say it's really our responsibility to reach out to students that we're working with or grad programs that we're working with or familiar with to help encourage them about the opportunities. Are you encouraging students at your own school to think about having a summer internship somewhere else and sharing those opportunities? You know, what does that candidate pool show us? Well, I mean, first of all, I think it shows us 2 years of many interns trying to find positions without host sites to host them. Certainly that was, I think our field's completely flipped in the internship world since a year ago. A year ago, I had hundreds and hundreds of candidates trying to find a few positions that were posted out there. And now it's vice versa. And we have an opportunity this year for you all to not only spread the word and recruit intern candidates to the process, but also, I mean, this is a season, and this was noted on an earlier slide, this is a season where you as host sites are going to need to go through candidate profiles, find folks that connect to your position or have skill sets that will work with you, and reach out to them and say, hey, you look like you'd be a great fit for a position. I hope you take a look and you're interested and apply. So you're going to need to recruit the pool this year. If you wish to just wait for everyone to come apply with you, they will, but not at the rate that they will if you do some outreach and connect to the candidates in the pool. Certainly when I look at numbers in general in the pool, our candidate to posted position numbers are actually pretty even. We don't have the numbers of candidates that are going to go without positions this year, which is really nice. And then on the other side, you know, there are a few outlier positions that have huge amounts of intern candidates that are looking to fill their positions, 30 to 50 positions. So that skews our number. If we bring down that average, we are really close to a candidate per position. Just a matter of you finding your candidate and them believing that this is a great fit for them as well.
I have a good question from Brooks in the chat. How would you handle a situation where a student emails you about internship opportunities, but is not in the ACUHO-I portal? Do you incorporate them into your process as an outside external applicant or require them to go through the ACUHO-I formal process?
Well, that's a great question. I think if you want to serve the student to the best of your ability and they are open to internships anywhere, I'd say, hey, you should refer them to the internship process and become a candidate and see all the hundreds of opportunities that are out there. If they are someone that is, you know, locked in at your school and they want to stay on campus for the summer and do an internship there and they're not looking to move around, I can understand how you'd fill that on your end in your school. They won't be an ACUHO-I intern. That would just be an intern that you'd hire. They won't receive that status, I would say. And if you're going to hire them, I would then tell you to go into your listing, edit your listing, and take off one of the openings so that that reflects in the pool that you have one less opening because you hired someone who's already on your campus. But if they are just reaching out to you and they're from another campus, another part of the world wanting to come be an intern, I would refer them to join the program so they can be an official ACUHO-I intern and see both your opportunities and all the opportunities out there.
I will also add that if they're internal to your campus, and I've done this differently at every campus I've ever been at, like that I think is a philosophical conversation of like the purpose and mission of your internship. I know at GW, like my purpose is that it's not a GW student, that it's not somebody from this institution, and that we're bringing in kind of outside context and insights to not only benefit that intern, but benefit my staff and my team as well.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. In closing, any other questions that we have for our panelists or Spencer? All right, AD, Lauren, any last words of advice or anything for anyone in the process? Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Feel free, we will hang back. If you have any questions, you can always email Spencer. His email is right there, or we are happy to assist in any way. And the purple chat box on our webpage is a really great resource, and I believe that goes directly to Spencer.
I always love those messages. So thanks again to the committee for getting together and our panel for sharing information with you. I'm going to close off the recording part of the session now, and we'll hang back if you want to ask unrecorded questions. So thanks again for joining us.